Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. In today's classic motorcycle review, we'll be taking a look at Honda's 1984 through 1986 CB700SC. This is also called the Nighthawk 700S. In this video, we'll take a look at the history of the Nighthawk 700S. We'll also talk about the specs of the bike, and in a little bit, I will gear up, I'll take the camera along, and we'll see what this bike is like to ride out on the road. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. The first time I rode one of these motorcycles was in the early 1990s, and when I rode it, I was really impressed with it. I love the electric smooth power that this bike made. I love the idea of a motorcycle with self-adjusting valves and shaft final drive, and I've been looking for a nice example of one of these ever since. Recently, things lined up for me, and I found this low mileage, great running example for what I thought was a reasonable price, and so I picked it up. Looking at the history of the Nighthawk S, this bike has kind of an interesting history to it. The Nighthawk S is the only bike in a long series of Nighthawk models that ever had sporting intent to it and was kind of designed to be a sporting motorcycle. So it's unique among the Nighthawk line of motorcycles. The Nighthawk 700 and 750 was based on the Nighthawk 550 and 650 design. However, even though the 650 was really the starting point of the design, the 700 and 750 share almost no parts in common with the earlier Nighthawk 650. Due to its sporting intent, the engine in the 700S was moved forward in the frame to keep more weight on the front wheel of the bike. Not only was the engine in the Nighthawk 700S moved forward in the frame compared to that of the 650, it was also given hotter cams and a host of internal improvements that really beefed up their performance. These improvements allowed the Nighthawk 700S to put out an impressive 80 horsepower, and that's on line with the leader bikes of the mid-70s. So that is a really impressive figure from a 700cc air-cooled engine. The front suspension, wheels, and brakes were lifted directly off of the Honda Interceptor motorcycle. The instruments on the Nighthawk S were also very similar to those found on the Interceptor. Styling-wise, the Nighthawk S is kind of a mix of the Interceptor styling and the earlier CB700F styling. It has a small sport fairing on the front of the bike that actually gives a little bit of wind protection as well. And for me, the styling on the 700S and 750S was really a highlight of the bike, and from a styling standpoint, it was always my favorite of the Nighthawk line of motorcycles. If you like great motorcycle related content and you want to help support this channel, you might want to consider becoming a member. Depending on the level of membership, members get additional bonus features such as early access to new videos and bonus content on this channel, and your support will help me continue to make good quality motorcycle content for you to enjoy.
Looking at the specs of the Nighthawk S, it had a 697cc dual overhead cam, inline 4-cylinder engine. It was an air-cooled engine. It was a 16-valve design, and the valves were hydraulically actuated. It featured a 9.3:1 compression ratio, and the engine was fed by 4 34mm Kian CV-type carbs. It featured electronic ignition, and the Nighthawk S was one of the earlier bikes to feature a rev limiter. Power output on the Nighthawk S was 80 horsepower at 10,000 RPM and 45 foot-pounds of torque at 8,000 RPM. Performance-wise, the Nighthawk S ran a 12-second flat quarter mile at 111 miles an hour, which was quite quick for a 700cc motorcycle of the time. And this was just a tick off of the Interceptor 700, which was the quickest bike in class. The Nighthawk S also had a top speed around 130 miles an hour. The transmission in the Nighthawk S was a 6-speed transmission, and this was mated to shaft final drive. Looking at the frame on the bike, it was a steel tube frame, and it featured a large rectangular backbone. Additionally, part of the frame was used to carry the oil from the engine to the oil cooler. Looking at the suspension on the bike, up front there were conventional forks. These were air adjustable, and they were designed to be run at 6 psi of air pressure. It also featured 4-way adjustment on the anti-dive setting on the left fork leg, and that changed the internal damping of the forks under braking. Out back, it featured dual conventional style shocks. These had both spring preload adjustment and compression damping adjustment. The wheels on the Nighthawk are 16-inch wheels, front and back. That was very popular for bikes of the mid-80s, but in today's world that does limit tire choice. In the braking department, up front, the Nighthawk featured dual disc brakes with 4 piston calipers acting on those, and out back it featured a drum style rear brake. Fuel capacity was 4.2 gallons. Miles per gallon on the Nighthawk was between 40 and 50 miles per gallon. This gave a range on the Nighthawk of about 150 miles before you need to hit reserve. Wet weight was 510 pounds. The wheelbase was 59.3 inches, and the seat height was a relatively accessible 30.7 inches. There were a few changes made over the course of production of the Nighthawk. The early bikes had a smaller oil sump, and the later bikes, like this 86, got a larger volume oil sump on the engine.
All right, enough talk. What is the Nighthawk like out on the road? I'm going to gear up. I'll bring my camera along. Let's find out together. Let's ride.
I am currently riding Honda's Nighthawk 700S motorcycle. This bike is a real cult classic motorcycle. Lots of people love it, and I think part of that is for the styling of it, part of that is for the performance of it. This was the hottest performing of the Nighthawk line of motorcycles. One of the first things I'm noticing is how smooth this bike is. There is just a mild tingle through the bars, and as the speed increases, that decreases. At certain speeds, there is almost no vibration through the motorcycle at any point, and it feels like the bike has an electric motor in it. The motor on this bike is rubber mounted. I think that contributes a lot to the smoothness of it, as does the shaft final drive. Even though this bike has stock exhaust, it sounds really nice. It is much louder than the later 750 Nighthawks. Handling wise, this bike is stable feeling. It does handle nicely, but it does not handle quite as quickly as you would expect a bike with a 16-inch front wheel to handle, and part of that is it's got a relatively narrow handlebar. And the handlebar on this bike is actually adjustable, so you can adjust it to suit your riding position, whatever you like. But the only thing you can't adjust is the width. They just don't get any wider than I have them set right now. And it doesn't give you much leverage on the bars. The seat on this bike has dual density foam in it, and so it feels almost too soft when you first sit on it, but I have gone on several extended rides and it is comfortable for long periods of time. And the sitting position also allows you to move forward and backwards on the seat and kind of change positions, and that contributes to the long-term comfort. The shifting on the bike is pretty smooth. It goes up and down through the gears nicely. It's occasionally a little bit notchy between first and second gear, but otherwise I haven't had any issues at all with the transmission. Power output on the bike is very smooth and very linear. It just continues to build as the revs rise. If you are used to riding 1000cc bikes like I am, it takes a little bit more shifting than those bikes do. And whereas on the big bikes, you don't really need to downshift if you want to pass, on a smaller bike like this, it pays to downshift 2 or 3 times. This motor really sings when you get it up into the higher RPM range. It's got a nice smooth spread of power. The smoothness of the power band, especially at lower RPM, really makes this bike ideal for less experienced riders, or even if you just want a relaxed ride going down through the countryside. This bike is not edgy to ride. Brakes are nice. It's amazing how friendly this bike is throughout most of the rev range and how strong it comes on up top. Man, that's fun. With the incredibly wide range of usable power that this bike has, you actually have to be a little bit deliberate with it if you want to go fast. It takes more concentration on your rev range than my typical leader bikes do. And then that's just the nature of a bike with a little bit smaller motor. The great thing about this bike is that with a couple of shifts, either up or down, you can go from mild to wild or wild to mild. And this is just a very mild-mannered, easygoing street bike when you want it to be. It doesn't pressure you to go fast, but it does have that performance on tap when you want it. And I think that's one of the reasons these are such a great all-around motorcycle. Although this bike has shaft final drive, you would never know it from the saddle. And because of the lower torque output of the 700cc engine, it does not exhibit a lot of the shaft jacking effect that you get with larger displacement shaft drive bikes of the era. At 65 miles an hour, there is almost no vibration to this bike whatsoever. It's almost an odd sensation how smooth it is at this speed. The little mini fairing in the front does offer a little bit of wind protection. I think you could put a little taller windscreen on it if you wanted a little bit more to do extended highway trips.
All right, man, what a lot of fun. The Nighthawk 700S is really a cult classic motorcycle for a very good reason. The combination of a very powerful, very smooth, very nice running engine, combined with all-day comfortable ergonomics and suspension that allows you to do any type of riding from commuting to sport riding to light-duty touring. Add to that a low-maintenance engine and driveline and really nice sporty styling on the bike. And this thing is just a fantastic all-around motorcycle, and it's really one of the best all-arounders that motorcycling has ever produced. This bike is easy enough to ride that beginning riders would not be too intimidated by it. In addition, it's got enough performance on tap that even older, more jaded riders like myself can get out and really have a blast riding this bike. Another reason I really like the Nighthawk is that even though it's kind of a parts bin special with parts sourced from other motorcycles, it really is an excellent, cohesive package. Everything is well balanced, and there's not one aspect of performance that really outshines all the others. And so the brakes are up to the power of the bike, the handling matches well with the power of the bike, and that well-balanced nature makes this bike an easy bike to live with over a long period of time. There's not little annoyances with it that really drive you crazy, as there are on some bikes. If I had any complaints about the Nighthawk, as good as the suspension is on the bike in a wide variety of settings, occasionally when you hit a sharp bump, it tends to kind of really come through the chassis. Additionally, the rear drum on the bike can be a little bit overly sensitive and prone to locking up. And my final minor complaint is that the transmission in this bike isn't quite as smooth as it is on, say, a Suzuki of the time period. On a side note here, one thing that really makes me laugh is that the Nighthawk 700S and 750S are touted as maintenance-free motorcycles simply because they have the hydraulically adjusted valves and shaft final drive. I think that's kind of funny because there are still plenty of items on the Nighthawks that need to be serviced. I'm actually in the editing process on a service video for this Nighthawk 700S, and it's by no means a maintenance-free motorcycle, although it is a lower maintenance motorcycle due to the hydraulic valves and the shaft final drive. Even with the hydraulic valve adjustment, to be honest, most people never check their valve clearances anyways, so that doesn't make a whole lot of difference to the majority of people out there. In summary, well, I have waited a long time to own one of these and to be able to put some extended miles on it, to get out and ride it and kind of get to know the bike a little bit. And I'm really happy with the purchase of this bike. I think it's a great bike to just hop on and go. I think it's a very comfortable motorcycle. I think it's a versatile motorcycle with a very broad spectrum of usability, and I am thoroughly enjoying getting to know this bike and getting out and putting some more miles on it. All right, I'd love to know what you guys think. If there are any Nighthawk fans out there, please let me know in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, enjoy the ride.